see here. March 17th, Apostasy and the Judges. Things are getting serious around here. One of the things, if you were with us yesterday, that we learned was just how vile the season of the Judges was and how the people really wound up living in this kind of a circular experience of going from bad to getting better to coming back and then going worse and getting better and coming back and getting worse, and in the kind of cyclical spiral down, which some might say America should relate to quite easily. And so there's these voices that keep calling them back, and then they continue to spiral out of faith. But apostasy in the Judges. Politically and militarily, there is need for a more complete conquest of the Promised Land. Spiritually, there is still a great lesson for a new generation of Israelites to learn, namely that the obedience comes prosperity. With disobedience, adversity. It is a lesson which the older Israelites had learned through the wilderness wanderings and the initial conquest of Canaan, but the passing of the older generation leaves a vacuum of any real dedication to God or his laws. From this point forward, Israel heads into both spiritual and political decline. It's as if the kids said, our parents didn't really know what they were doing with this whole God thing. The incomplete conquests have left Israel vulnerable to the pagan influences around them. As they began to evolve into a more agricultural society, the Israelites will become increasingly attracted to the Canaanite cult of Baal, which is associated with the fertility of and crops. A strong spirit of compromise leads to intermarriage, idolatry, immorality. The combination of national sin and unconquerable and the unconquered inhabitants result in dominance and oppression by various pagan people, just as God predicted. During this time, the Israelites go through repeated cycles of sin and oppression, but fortunately, of repentance as well. For each time the people come to their senses, God raises up a leader to deliver them. Each of these judges leads only a few tribes within the now loose federation of Israel. Although the total time of their collective leadership amounts to 450 years, the overlapping of their individual leadership probably puts the figure closer to 335 years.
The people served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had seen all the great things the Lord had done for Israel. After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshipped various gods of the peoples around them. They aroused the Lord's anger because they forsook him and served Baal and the Ashtoreths. In his anger against Israel, the Lord gave them into the hands of raiders who plundered them. He sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, whom they were no longer able to resist. Whenever Israel went out to fight, the hand of the Lord was against them to defeat them, just as he had sworn to them. They were in great distress. Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of these raiders. Yet they would not listen to their judges, but prostituted themselves to other gods and worshiped them. They quickly turned from the ways of their ancestors, who had been obedient to the Lord's commands. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge for them, he was with the judge and saved them out of the hands of their enemies as long as the judge lived. For the Lord relented because of their groaning under those who oppressed and afflicted them. But when the judge died, the people returned to ways even more corrupt than those of their ancestors, following other gods and serving and worshiping them. They refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways. Therefore, the Lord was very angry with Israel and said, because this nation has violated the covenant I ordained for their ancestors and has not listened to me, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations Joshua left when he died. I will use them to test Israel and see whether they will keep the way of the Lord and walk in it as their ancestors did. The Lord had allowed those nations to remain. He did not drive them out at once by giving them into the hands of Joshua.
These are the nations the Lord left to test all those Israelites who had not experienced any of the wars in Canaan. He did this only to teach warfare to the descendants of the Israelites who had not had previous battle experience. The 5 rulers of the Philistines, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites living in the Lebanon mountains from Mount Baal Hermon to Lebo Hamath. They left to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the Lord's commands, which he had given their ancestors through Moses. Israel fails tests. The Israelites lived among the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, and they took their daughters in marriage and gave their daughters to their sons and served their gods. In the first century of the Israel decline, various tribes are oppressed by the Mesopotamians, Moabites, Philistines. Othniel, the nephew of Caleb, leads Judah and Simeon in the victory over the Mesopotamians. Ehud personally associates the leader of the Moabites, who have been enemies of Israel ever since King Balak tried to get Balaam to pronounce a curse on the Israelites. It is by Ehud's outrageous act that the tribes of Ephraim and Benjamin are thus liberated from the occupation by a nation which Israel had once defeated soundly. Finally, brief mention is given to Shamgar, who will be the first of several Israelites to be battle with the warlike Philistines in the southern coastal area of Canaan.
Oppression by Mesopotamians. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asherahs. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, so he sold them into the hands of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram Naharaim. Okay, it's embarrassing. I have no idea how to pronounce the names, so bear with me. To whom the Israelites were subject for 8 years. Deliverance by Othniel. But when they cried out to the Lord, he raised up for them a deliverer, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, who saved them. The Spirit of the Lord came on him, so that he became Israel's judge and went to war. The Lord gave Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram, into the hands of Othniel, who overpowered him. So the land had peace for 40 years until Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and because they did this evil, the Lord gave Eglon, king of Moab, power over Israel, getting the Ammonites and Amalekites to join him. Eglon came and attacked Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. The Israelites were subject to Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. Again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, the son of Jerah, the Benjaminite. The Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about a cubit long, which he strapped to his right thigh under his clothing. He presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab, who was a very fat man. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way those who had carried it. But on reaching the stone images near Gilgal, he himself went back to Eglon and said, "Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you." This king said to his attendants, "Leave us." And they all left. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace and said, "I have a message from God for you." As the king rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. Then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came and found the doors of the upper room locked. They said he must be relieving himself in the inner room of the palace. They waited to the point of embarrassment, but when he did not open the doors of the room, They took a key and unlocked them. There they saw their Lord fallen to the floor dead. While they waited, Ehud got away. He passed by the stone images and escaped to Sarah. When he arrived there, he blew a trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hills, with him leading them. Follow me, he ordered, for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands. So they followed him down and took possession of the fords of the Jordan that led to Moab. They allowed no one to cross over. At that time, they struck down about 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong, not one escaped. That day, Moab was made subject to Israel, and the land had peace for 80 years. After Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath, who struck down his 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel.
All right. What did you guys make of all that?
It feels like they just kept repeating history and had to learn everything the hard way, had to suffer first before, well, and they weren't even really repenting. The Lord was just merciful by sending a judge to conquer their enemies.
Mm-hmm.
I was glad to see Caleb being brought back into the story and how his descendants were.
Todd?
Well, interesting too how in the absence of a leader, they kind of fall apart. And I'm gonna make an assumption that they probably didn't like having a leader. And so then when they didn't have one, they thought it was great. And then they realized all the things that were going wrong, and they realized that they had to have a leader. So then they got a leader again, and then they followed the leader. And then when the leader died, and they thought, well, good, we don't need a leader anymore. We'll be fine without one. And like, Shannon said, that cycle just kind of keeps coming back. No, we don't want leadership. Leave us alone.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need a leader. And God would raise.
Wanted to do what they wanted to do. And if they weren't connecting how their evil led to adversity rather than being obedient and turning to the Lord, leads to being under his blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Also for the fact that obviously their ancestors had not told the stories as much as they should have, because they were not, it seemed like they did not know what all God had provided and done for them ahead of time, what they had done for their fathers and their grandfathers and stuff like that.
That goes back to that kind of an idiom that words without action, that's hypocrisy. We don't need that, right? Action without words, though, that's mystery. And a lot of times I think a generation thinks my kids will know how to live their lives because of the way I live my good life. And they find themselves amazed and surprised that their kids did not connect those dots. But you look through history and they never do. They never do. It's not like the next generation ever recognizes, oh, the good life that my parents are living that I aspired to has to do with their faith. It's like there's an absolute disconnect, but it's not like it's a new disconnect. It's a disconnect that happens generation after the next generation, because it always skips one. You have this kind of this ebb and flow where a generation gets skipped because the connection is somehow missed. And a tribute to you, Edie, for just the way that with which you connected dots for your kids, and not everybody does that well. So
I don't feel I've done that well.
Yeah, well,
Jenny is Jenny's the proof.
Yeah, she's pretty amazing, I will say.
Proof is in the
sure
Jenny.
she got it all from me, but she is certainly amazing.
Yeah, Jenny's the pudding, I guess, right? All right. Any other observations? That one king, he had that sword thrust into him that passed the hilt. That's
it was like detail that we really need to know that.
Yeah, then the fat kind of circled in around. So this big fat guy, they're all thinking he's in the inner John, and they waited an embarrassing long time for him. I think the story is so funny. I mean, I'm just amazed that nobody cracked a smile. You guys all played that, straight, and I'm over here just kind of rolling on the floor and thinking, oh man, that's funny writing right there. The Bible is hysterical. I mean, you read some of the stuff, it's like, how did that get in there?
Yeah.
And,
and I was wondering, like, Ehud's left-handed, and I was like, okay, why are they sharing that? And then we get to the part where he pulls the sword from his right thigh. I'm like, oh, probably because, he wasn't expecting it from his left hand, or,
Right. Because everything's done by the right hand.
Yeah. So there you have it. I mean, all this little detail, I mean, it's like so fantastic. All right. Before we dive into the questions, I'm going to take a risk. There's a clip that I found just before we got started. Some of you were here as I was scrambling to find it. But years ago, my son Caleb turned me on to this guy named Jordan Peterson, who's written a book about I think the 11 laws for living or something like that. And he is a psychologist, sociologist, and just a brilliant guy. He has 1 million plus young men following his teachings. This last year, he's been very, very, very sick. But he did a series on Genesis that is maybe the best thing I've ever listened to. He is not a Christian, but he is on the brink. I mean, his faith story is emerging at an amazing place, and he works things out loud. So this is from a segment that is much larger, about an hour and a half. And I think this is the segment that I wanted to share, but it entirely might not be, but he's so good, I'm going to play it anyway, and we'll just see what happens. So here we go.
It isn't obvious to me, and I think maybe I derived this criticism from Nietzsche, but people have asked me whether or not I believe in God, and I've answered in various ways. No, but I'm afraid he probably exists. That's one answer. Yeah, no, but I'm terrified he might exist. That would be a truthful answer to some degree, or that I act as if God exists, which I think is, I do my best to do that. But then there's a real stumbling block there, because there's no limit to what would happen if you acted like God existed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I believe that acting that out fully, I mean, maybe it's not reasonable to say to believers, you aren't sufficiently transformed for me to believe that you believe in God, or that you believe the story that you're telling me. You're not a sufficient, the way you live isn't sufficient testament to the truth. And
That's
people
right.
would certainly say that, let's say, about the Catholic Church, or at least the way that it's been portrayed, is that with all the sexual corruption, for example, it's like, really, you believe that the Son of God, that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and yet you act that way, and I'm supposed to buy your belief. And it seems to me that the church is actually quite guilty on that account, because the attempts to clean up the mess have been rather half-hearted in my estimation.
Yeah.
And so I don't think Christians don't manifest this, and I'm including myself, I suppose, in that description, perhaps don't manifest the transformation of attitude that would enables the outside observer to easily conclude that they believe.
Yeah. Now, the way to deal with that, or the way to understand that, is that they do in a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy of manifestation of the transformation that God offers the world, and we kind of live in that hierarchy. And those above us hold us together, you would say. And so in the church, there's a testimony of the saints. There are stories. There are hundreds and hundreds of stories of people who live that out in their particular context to the limit of what it's possible to live it. And even today, there are there are saints, living saints, who, for example, like in the Orthodox tradition, we have this idea of what they call it, the gift of tears, or the joyful sorrow of people who live in prayer with weeping, constant weeping. And it's this kind of strange mix of joy and sadness, which kind of overwhelm them, and they live in that joy and sadness nonstop, and they pray, without end. And so that exists. But then that's one of the reasons why. That's kind of one of the reasons why, when I talk about this idea of attention, like it manifests itself in the church as well, is that you often say, and I understand it, when you say something like, I act as if God exists, or, I'm afraid to say that God exists. And I think it's because you think, or you tend to think, that the moral weight of that is so strong that we would crumble under it, that you would just be crushed under it. And I think
believe that.
And I think I understand that. But the first thing to act as if God exists, let's say it this way, to act as if God exists, the first thing that it asks of you is not a moral action. The first thing that it asks of you is attention. That's why to act as if God exists is, first of all, to worship. And I know people are going to hear this.
Well, then I have a terrible problem with that too at the moment, because I'm in so much pain. Like, one of the things that one of these theologians discussed the idea of, and sorry, I want to let you get back to your point, but he discussed the idea of the yoke of Christ being light, and that there was joy in it. And there's a paradox there, obviously, because it's also a take up your cross and follow me sort of thing. But the fact that I've been living in constant pain makes the idea of joy seem cruel, I would say. And I have no idea how to reconcile myself to that. I mean, I've reconciled myself to that by staying alive, despite it. Although by staying alive despite it, but there's very little worship. And it doesn't mean I'm not appreciative of what I have. I'm not only am I appreciative of what I have, I do everything I can to remind myself of it all the time. And so does my wife. I mean, she's changed quite a bit as a consequence of her struggle with cancer, has become much more overtly religious, I would say. And, we say grace before our meal in the evening, and it's a very serious enterprise. And it always centers around gratitude, for the ridiculous volume of blessings that have been showered down upon us at a volume that's really quite incomprehensible. But despite that, despite that, I'm struggling with this because I don't know how to reconcile myself to the fact of constant pain.
Yeah.
And I feel that it's unjust, which is halfway to being resentful, which is not a good outcome.
No, I agree. And I can't speak, I don't know how to speak to that, because I don't have that experience. I don't have that. I don't live with constant pain. And so I don't know what that would do to me. It's probably one of the reasons why it might ruin me, And so, it's very difficult to answer that. I think that the answer has been the cross. That's been the answer. It's maybe easy for me to just say it that way. But that's always been the answer of Christianity, which is that God went to the cross, and that God went down into death and plunged down into death. And there are mysteries hidden, and they're very well hidden, but there are mysteries hidden in that depth. But it's not. I don't think it's my job to moralize to you at this particular moment.
All right. Well, I'll stop it there. It does address some of the questions. It isn't the best. It isn't the best clip in this series, but not the one I was hoping for. But man, it nails a few of the points in our Q&A, though, doesn't it? So let me see if I can figure out how to stop this here. Here we go. So back to our questions. Why do you think the presence of evil in the world keeps some people from embracing Christianity, or the presence of evil manifested in sickness and disease and pain and in pain, right? Here's a guy who's in pain. He's like, I don't know how do I worship in the midst of the injustice of my pain, right? And why do you think the presence of evil in the world keeps some people from embracing Christianity?
That was a really good clip. It was like he is on the brink. I could just like feel it, how he was stumbling over his words and he was so emotional. That was such a good clip. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I think that fear is a driving force of, evil and fear go hand in hand. It's if God is real, if I am a filthy sinner, if, then it's too much. Where it would be too much, but in God's grace and mercy, he sanctifies us little by little. He reveals to us truly, yes, how filthy, dirty, wicked we are little by little, but in that he also provides us with that forgiveness and the strength and the courage to keep walking with him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see that, it is an interesting, he's in torment because I think, Shannon, like you said, he's that close, Mark, and you brought it up earlier. He's that close to, I'll say, crossing the line, if you will, because I don't know if it was Jenny or if it was Ginny who mentioned this idea that he recognizes the fact that he's not worthy, so to speak, of the blessings that he's been given, which to me means he acknowledges the fact that those blessings are coming from something greater than him. And it's like, I want to say, dude, let it go. It's like, you're right there. But I think, to Shanna's point, people struggle with those ideas of a good God allowing these things. How can a good God allow these things to happen? Yet when we truly understand who we are in Christ, we realize just how fallen we are and how much we need that grace. And so when you get on the backside and look the other direction, I'm so grateful that he does love me in spite of these things. But yet on the flip side of that, until you can come to that reconciliation, it's a very hard thing to accept, right?
Well, I also think when you have such a high expectation of perfection, and then for him, I felt like the reconciliation of there's no such thing as perfection other than Jesus. And he had such a high standard, or seems to have such a high standard, that if you are a Christian, you're going to be right here, right next to Jesus. You are not going to make mistakes. You are going to walk the talk. You're going to live out your life with biblical truths, and you will not stumble. And because I have not seen anybody in this world do that, I can't believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think that too. That's what he was thinking, or that's what he had, this high expectation. But I could see this because my husband deals with pain all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I could totally understand what he was saying when he's got this pain and he never seems to get relief, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And yet I've seen Darwin, how he deals with it. And he does go on and doesn't dwell in it. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes you dwell in something, it's hard to pull yourself out of it.
Right. I think it's really hard. I think you're right.
I had somebody tell me that, my expectations were so high that if I would lower my bar, then I wouldn't be disappointed. And so I was like, okay, okay. So, and this was like from our, family wheelhouse, is like, I just expected too much of my mom and my sisters. And if I would lower my bar, I would not be so disappointed and angry. So I was like, okay, so I'm just not going to expect anything. But I get super frustrated with that because it's like, no, like I want to expect, I want, a thing. And so that's where my mourning comes from, is like the wish it would have been. When my dad passed away, it was like, I mourned not because I knew him and was in relationship with him, but over what I wish would have been and what should have been in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point. When you look at why it is that people are able to, in some cases, experience faith and other people don't, it's easy, I think, for some of us to be judgmental about, well, they're not doing it right, they're not giving themselves over to it right. And it's really hard when we don't know people's stories to understand the obstacles to the faith that they're experiencing. And it's really, really valuable to try to hear and understand where people are coming from as they're pushing back against their faith. One of the things that I hear sometimes is the notion that the reason they're pushing back against their faith is that they're not good enough, or that the world around them isn't good enough, right? And I think one of the great pictures that we have is the picture of the Passover, and that picture that was going to point towards Christ in the Passover really, I think, affords us an opportunity. If I can, let's see here, what did my screen share? Anything?
Yeah, you've got a bunch of.
You got the blood on the Passover blood.
Yeah. So when you think about the Passover and the people that go out and they paint the blood on their doors, why did the angel of death pass over their house?
It was because of the blood.
Because of blood.
Wasn't their goodness, right? I mean, it wasn't how good they were or how bad they were. It's like the angel of death didn't stop in front of the door and say, you know what, old Fred here, I can't really let him in. He's not good enough. He just, if you knew what Fred has done, if you knew what Jordan Peterson has done, if you knew, he can't get in, right? That wasn't what the angel of death used as the evaluative construct as to whether or not someone was going to make it into heaven or not, right? Or make it into the promised land, or be the chosen people, or experience the blessing. It was whether or not you have the blood on the door. And the step of faith that the Israelites had to do was to embrace the blood and to put the blood on the door. If they put the blood on the door, they're being granted relational entrance was otherwise indeterminate by their behavior, their actions, their attitudes, their heart towards their family, to their friends, towards the Israelites, the anger, the bitter, it was based on the blood. And what a great picture that really becomes towards the notion that we're saved not because of your right behavior, your wrong behavior, your good choices, your bad choices, the weightiness of are you going to be good enough? Does the scale tip in your favor or not? It's all about Jesus's sacrifice on the cross, which is what our panelist, an Orthodox believer that does a lot of vlogging and podcasting, a guy named Jonathan, he was trying to articulate that, it really does come down to this issue of the cross. It really does come down to the issue of the sacrifice of Yeshua on the cross that is going to be the anchor of our faith and the modality which allows us to enter into the covenant that we have now as the new covenant in God's relationship to humanity. So really remarkable, that idea that the blood covers the sin, and the church isn't going to be good enough. and the church isn't going to look good enough. It's not going to look right enough. It's not going to be the witness that we want it to be. The only thing that we have is grace. And I love that we see in this engaged dialogue, this person who's on the brink of recognizing God's grace and sees it in so many different ways, God's favor and grace on his life, and is unsure what to do with it. Any final thoughts from our study or our reading today?
As long as you don't walk behind me.
I really wanted to hear how you answered the next question, because for me, I struggle with that one, not because I struggle with how to answer it. It's like in my heart, I see how God uses suffering and how he allows it, but that's the one that it's really hard for me to explain to others. So it's like, oh, I can't wait to hear what everybody else says. And now it's 7:40.
Why does this story tell us about why God allows bad things to happen to believers? Well, ultimately, I would just, with 1 minute left, give us this summarization. Evil in the world, bad things happen. We have free choices. Bad things happen. We entered into a land, as we've been now born into a people in exile. You know, we're out of the garden. We're not underneath that canopy. We're not underneath that favor. And so now we have disease. We do have destructive tendencies, self-destruction, vile interests, warring tendencies. You know, all of that is now in us because we've been born into exile and out of relationship that was right and intended. And so, you know, it's kind of like if you know, you were the great granddaughter, Shanna, of Benedict Arnold, you don't get to maintain your American citizenship. You've now been born into exile, you know. And so there's just a tendency for us to not recognize the power of living out of right relationship with God and the long implications of that on our family system. And you know, none of us need to hearken back so far to recognize that some of the decisions we've made have far-reaching consequences. And some of us have an experience where the consequences that our parents made have deeply wounding, far-reaching consequences. And some of our parents have an experience where what their parents did have long, far-reaching, deeply wounding, long-reaching consequences. We're born a people outside of God's desire, the garden. And his great plan is to redeem us back to himself and give us an eternity with him that is rightly restored. And to that, we have the hope of glory for those of us who put our trust in the finished work of the cross and the blood of Jesus. And it isn't because of our goodness that will earn us the right. It is the work of Christ and the blood shed on the cross. So, Father, we do thank you for the recognition that not one of us here is worthy of being the recipient of your grace, but because of your good, generous heart towards your people and your longing to be in relationship with those with whom you created, you've made a way for us to be in right relationship with you. Help us to walk in a restored way that demonstrates who you are in our lives with more authenticity to the broken world around us, that they have less reason because of us to choose you. So God, restore in us a commitment to live our lives well because of who you are in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, gang, blessings. Make it a great day. Live as though you are the redeemed, because many of you are.
Happy St. Patty's Day.
Happy St. Patty's Day.
Thank you, Edie. Thank you, Shanna. Have a good day, everyone.
You.
Thank you.